And now back to Bobby Likis Car Clinic and your host, Bobby Likis.
The best thing about July the 4th weekend is we close on Monday, so yours truly gets a day off. Now, so does everyone else in the house, but that's okay, too. We all have to have a break. Speaking of a break, we're going to see who breaks and who wins and who loses the upcoming race on July the 4th. And to give us that information, well, I don't know if he has a crystal ball or not, but he's certainly experienced enough. Terry Sabiston from WNDB. So, Terry, I want to welcome you once again to Bobby Likis Car Clinic. Did you bring your crystal ball?
I don't know about crystal balls, but how about a motorsports stadium here at Daytona International Speedway, the world center of racing? What a great place to be on race day. This is about as good as it gets, race day at Daytona. And don't need any crystal balls. We're going to have fireworks. That's simple.
Stadium. Listen to what you said. Think about it, folks. It's not the racetrack. It's a stadium. And there, indeed, just as an aside, the Daytona Rising project that started in 2013 and then finally finished on time, as I understand, this year, after 3 years of work and a $400 million expansion. And now it's a stadium. And I got to say, Terry, from what I have seen, and I've not walked the premises yet, but I will definitely do that. It's got to be one whale of a production just to take it all in. What's it like? Give us that overview, and then I have a couple of questions about that race that I saw last night and that overtime. But let me. I'm a little confused.
I think we all at one point were a little confused there. When cars are wrecking on the back stretch and they're coming around the front stretch, you're not sure what's going to happen where. And that was a lot of fun last night. But for an overview here, okay, there's so much property here that at some points in the past few days, we've had rain in one corner and sun in the other. And that's how large it is. The Motorsports Stadium itself is just, if you think about it, it's over a mile long. And it's really about 7 stories high, and it takes up a huge part of your view when you look off in that direction. You turn around the other way, and you can see Daytona International Airport. You turn back around, and there's this wall of seats, and you just keep looking, and it's beyond what you can scope in one. You have to turn your head. You got to do a panoramic view to see it all. It's that big. And last night under the lights, it's just a whole nother world when you throw that under the lights, and the fans are all in the stands. And tonight's going to be even more people, and then the largest fireworks show in the Southeast after the race. So we are in the World Center of Racing. It's been an interesting 3 days. We've been on the air continuously since Thursday, and it was interesting because we were on from 10 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock at night, and there was only about 25 minutes of track activity due to weather. So we learned the gift of gab, and it's amazing the people that we got to talk to and come in and join us to help fill that time, whether it be MRN or drivers or Tony Stewart or Kurt Busch. We had a wonderful day of radio. But then yesterday was a day of on-track activity, and it was a full day with qualifying for both Xfinity and Cup Series, and then you saw it last night on TV, but to be there live as a whole, it's just an amazing world to see this happen and to be part of it. And I don't understand why Bobby Likis isn't here for the 4th of July.
Well, only because of other duties, and in my heart of hearts, I am there with you. But Terry, about the overtime last night, just give our audience, our listeners, a quick overview of how does overtime work? Because I thought I was pretty well familiar with all the rules that NASCAR had, but when does overtime come into play and how?
What happened was there was a caution with 4 laps to go.
Okay.
And at that point, under the caution, they literally finished the allotted number of laps. Okay. So at that point, they said, we're going to go into overtime. Now, when the green flag falls for overtime, if they make it to the line on the backstretch, we are done. It doesn't matter what happens after that. The race is over. Now, if they wreck before they get to that line, we will do another overtime. And if they wreck before they get to that line again, we will do another overtime. Well, they didn't wreck by the time they got to that line, so they kept racing. Now, the caution came out on the last lap after the white flag on the backstretch, and there was concerns for some of the cars and safety of those guys. They held the caution as long as they could, but they wanted to get the safety equipment and check on all the drivers out there. There was some pretty hard hits, and at that point, they said, we've got to throw the caution. Now, when that happens, they literally have tracking things across the track, but they'll take the video and analyze it down to who was leading at the instant that caution came on. And Eric Armarella just had really good luck and timing with him, and he was the winner. And it was down to literally fractions of an inch and timing on that light. And that's just, that's pretty exciting when you really think about it.
Well, it really is. And then now, as you were explaining that, in my mind, the wheels were turning. I said, well, overtime, now we have double overtime. And that just, I think, adds another dimension, really, when you think about it, to the sport and to the sport not only of racing, but one of the things that I think the fans did not appreciate, not about now, but historically, was the fact that if you had, and I don't know when this rule went away, but if you had a caution and you finished the last 2 laps on caution, I mean, where's the climax on that? So is that what it's about?
Well, a lot of those changes, I mean, if you go back in history, there's times we have finished under caution. And that's just not a good way, with the guys coming back at a slow pace in the winter.
Right.
So here was a way, and they had the green, white, checkered, but we ran into some issues with that last year on restarts. They weren't happy with, there was wrecks on restarts that factored out that green, white, checkered because, there was judgment calls there. Now they've got set rules. There's that line on the back stretch. If they have a wreck on the restart, they're going to say, all right, we'll do it again. They have another wreck on the restart, which we did in January or February. We had a couple wrecks on those restarts, or a year before, last year actually, not this year, and that created just an unusual situation there. And this was NASCAR's way of saying, here, wait a minute, let's be more definite in what we're doing. Let's make sure that we have put on a show for the end the best we can. Now, I got to give them credit last night because there was some pretty big carnage on the backstretch, and you want to make sure those drivers are okay. And you've got to make a decision. But that gives them they know once they make that decision, the race is over. And it was, you got to give these guys credit. 200 miles an hour, bumper to bumper, and they're not backing off for anything.
Well, no, I saw, and in fact, the last 2 or 3 or 4 laps there, the car 1 and 2, as they were coming around, you could see, it appeared to me that, in fact, one car on television, you could see where he was bumping the car in front of him, the old bump and run. And, I mean, they never let off the accelerator. And, folks, think about it running 200-plus miles per hour down a straightaway. And let's think about the interstate. You're running 75. What if you had to turn around, go the other direction, and you had sort of a track to do that? But what about running 200-plus miles per hour and then turning left? And that's got to be really exciting. And on those restarts, Terry, it amazes me. Can you imagine if you're like three or 4 positions back, or 5 positions back, or even leading that last few laps, the anxiety and the heartbeat and the pressure that goes on with, I got to do, come on, car, give me more engine, That's the time that you need a little secret sauce in the car to outrun everybody.
Well, the secret sauce, and for these cars, the Xfinity cars are old Cup cars designs. And a few years ago, remember, we had the bump drafting. Well, these start cars still line up pretty good for that. But the Cup guys, they've made changes, so you really can't bump draft. But these guys, they would hook up, and it's fine until and it happened during the race a couple times there, you get bumping a little too hard, you hit the left rear corner, and the car in front of you turns right, and guess what? There's a caution, and there's trouble. So you've got to be an artist, literally, to do this at 200 miles an hour. And then there at the end, like you say, and NASCAR has said there's places you can bump and camp. They're going to reinforce those rules. But, you look at what these guys were doing, and you've got to have, I don't know, either you're crazy or something's missing to do these things like this at 200 miles an hour. I mean, I've been out there I was out there last Friday doing the Richard Petty ride-along at 165. And that's heart pumping just with 1 or 2 cars out there. Can you imagine 40?
I cannot. No, I really can't. I mean, I cannot, and especially if you're in the 20th position. I mean, if you're in the middle, you're literally at the mercy of the crowd, of the pack. And if someone zigs and you zag, you're done. Well, listen,
we've seen it. We've had an ARCA race there a few years back where they were running a fuel mileage game, and the front 3 cars ran out of gas coming out of turn 4. Bobby Gerhart in 10th place heads up to the wall, passes the wreck as it goes by, and he wins the race from 10th place.
That's amazing.
And that's coming out of turn 4. That's Daytona. You never know what's going to happen between turn 4 and the start-finish line on that last lap. And that goes back 1976, David Pearson, Richard Petty. That was my first race at Daytona. And right in front of me, Richard Petty hit the wall on that last lap. And I was like, he was my favorite driver, and here he was going for another win at Daytona, and him and Pearson are bump fender to fender, and it doesn't get any better than that. And that's what NASCAR wants. They want to put on a great show and entertain you and keep the competition level the level it's at or better.
We got a hard break. I do have a couple of more short questions, so if you would, stay with us through the break and then come back. Folks, don't touch your dial. A little bit more of Terry when we get back.
And now back to Bobby Likis Car Clinic and your host, Bobby Likis.
And folks, I hope that you held on through the break, because with us is Terry Sabiston from Daytona Beach, and actually from the Daytona International Speedway in Daytona. Then I have just a couple of questions left over for Terry, and he was gracious enough to stay with us. And then we're going to Detroit and talk with Jim. So Terry, I have 3 questions, none of which are trick questions. But number one, one's easy, and that would be who's on pole, or has that been decided yet?
Yeah, it was decided yesterday afternoon, and Greg Biffle and Carl Edwards are on the front row. Biffle's got the pole, and that's just it was awesome watching that yesterday. Qualifying is different at Daytona than it is everywhere else. You get to go out and lay down just the fastest lap you possibly can, and it all comes down to how well the crew and the team got that car. And that engine is smooth and as fast as it can. And the driver's job is just to point it and go and hold it down and drive the fastest lap we can. And Greg Biffle came out and you got to run one round where you get in the top 12, and then the top 12 come out and get to run another round. So 193 miles an hour for the pole. Just unbelievable the speeds that they're running out here with these the new cars and a little less horsepower and then the restrictor plates and everything. But, this is it was fun watching pole qualifying yesterday. And they had Xfinity qualifying, too, right before that, and it was the same process. And these guys get out there, and they just give it all they got for one lap and lay down just the hottest lap they can. And the thing about it is once they get in the pack, they're actually going to go faster than what they qualified with one car by themselves.
Right. And folks, just for you to know, with restrictor plate racing, a restrictor plate means that the engines are governed because there's a fixed venturi, there's a fixed mouth size. Like if you're running and you run out of breath, if you breathe through your nose and you're running, eventually if you run hard enough, you have to open your mouth to get extra air in. Well, with a restrictor plate, you don't get extra air. You get whatever NASCAR gives you, and as I understand, that's something like 29, 30 seconds. You've got 4 holes the size of a quarter that feed these engines, or actually restrict these engines. So 193 miles per hour that Terry just spoke of means the average speed. So that includes through the turns and what have you. So that's making hay. Now, the second question, no trick, but who would be your wild guess winner? Just your wild guess.
Actually, Tony Stewart is on a roll right now, and it doesn't happen too often that you win the race before Daytona and you win Daytona. But if there's anybody who can do it, and there's anybody who seems to have momentum and attitude, Tony's on a roll right now, and Tony's been known when the hotter it gets, the better he drives. And it's going to be a hot summer night here in Daytona. And, Tony it's his last season. It's his last race at Daytona. I couldn't think of a better way for him to go out of Daytona and do that. It's a wild card, but Tony Stewart could easily do it.
Okay, my final question, and just the feeling that I get, and you may already have this, who would you like to win? Who would you prefer to win? Or have we already heard that name? And I'm not putting you on the spot, more or less.
Well, if you really want my honest opinion, I was there in 1976 when the 43 didn't make it to the first place starting line. So, and the roots go deep with that Richard Petty. So, Eric Armarella, he went out and won last night. What a momentum to carry him into today, and that team has got to be really up and excited, and that would be to see the 43 back in victory lane. If you remember, the 43 has been in victory lane at Daytona with the rain when it got rained out a year or two ago. So for him to put that car back in and do it racing instead of the rain would just be awesome.
Well, there you have it, folks. That's about it. That's as good as it gets. So Terry, according to Vegas odds, that my light's flashing over here, and the Vegas odds said that for Eric Almirola to win and Tony Stewart to come in second by a nose would be. We would have to call you and get you into the crystal ball realm because you'd have it. Hey, thank you so much for your call and, as always, for your reports from Daytona, from the International Speedway. And I've got to say before we say goodbye that Joey Chitwood III. Although he has been, his position has been elevated now there within the Daytona International Speedway hierarchy, he did a whale of a job operating the track through all of the transition, through all the Daytona Rising, as did all the folks there in Daytona. So from my heart to everyone in the area that can hear my voice there in that part of the world, hats off to you, and for all the locals that put up with all the all the racers and all the motorcycles and everybody else. Terry, thanks again for calling, and we'll hear from you again as soon as the next event comes up.
Well, thanks, Bobby. And live from Daytona International Speedway, the World Center of Racing, the first motorsports stadium, Terry Sabiston here, loving the 4th of July. If you're not at the track for this race tonight, you need to be watching it on TV because this is going to be the biggest fireworks show for the 4th of July weekend.
You got it. Thanks, my friend.